Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 24th of June 2011. My name is Totalbiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com with topics for future shows. The game in the background is the solo practice mode for some of the multiplayer in Fear 3, which looks to be highly entertaining. Unfortunately, the PC version seems to be lacking in 1, games to join, and 2, games that actually work when attempting to join. But nonetheless, I'll hopefully be bringing you a full WTF is of this particular game a little bit later on, probably over the next few days. I must apologise once again, my throat's rather raw at the moment. I have caught Viking germs. They are rather virulent. The first one comes in from Sunny that says, "Hello TB, I was wondering what you thought about TF2 becoming a free-to-play game. From what I've seen on various message boards, people seem to be concerned that the large influx of players will ruin the overall game experience by hacking, mic spamming, etc. Some people also feel cheated because they had to pay for the game and their only compensation is a spiffy hat. From an economic standpoint, I can see why they did this, as from what I've heard, the majority of the game's profit comes from the microtransactions, and the free-to-play crowd will only increase that. But for a company that seems to value their customers more than most companies do, Valve seems to be taking a risk of disappointing their paying customers, something I didn't think they would actually want to do. So what do you think? Will this ruin the overall game experience, and what do you think about pay-to-play games going free-to-play? I don't see this ruining the overall game experience at all, if I'm totally honest with you. Oh no, more people will come into the game. Yeah, there are an awful lot of dumb people in the game already. Very big fallacy here, that money is a barrier against idiots. I state as my prime example World of Warcraft. There are plenty of dumb people there, and they still have to pay $15 a month. That's got nothing to do with it. Oh, but they can't afford the game. There are a lot of people that can't afford games. I can think of one primary demographic, college students. They're generally fairly smart, last I checked, otherwise they wouldn't be there in the first place. So, to me, that seems like a complete non-issue. As to the second part, saying, oh, well, we had to pay for it, why should they get it for free? Okay, let's just apply that same logic to any game that you've ever bought on Steam that then went on sale, including, say, TF2. I got the orange box on the day of release. So all of you guys that waited until it went on one of its many sales to buy it, you're all subhuman scum and shouldn't be allowed within the game. Now, last I checked, this game came out in 2007. Yes, October 9th, 2007, if I recall correctly, through to October the 18th elsewhere. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is quite a long time. If they decide after that period of time that they want to make it free, then so be it. There have been many occasions where it's been next to free anyway. Plenty of sales on this game. Hey, for God's sake, I'm trying to think who doesn't own it, really. Anyone that has Steam seems to own this game, and I don't see why they wouldn't. So no, I don't see it as harming it at all. You should be happy if you happen to be an experienced player that a bunch of new blood is coming in. Fresh meat. Gun them down, folks. Yes, noobs to the slaughter. It's what you want. It's what you need. As regards to whether or not you're upset that, oh, these people might be mic spammers and things like that. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. You seem to be implying that the TF2 community was amazing to begin with. No, it's just as bad as pretty much anything else. And your good experiences from TF2 result from playing on good, well-admin servers, which will continue to exist. In fact, the demand for them may increase, and the number of them may also be increased by the increase in players. If you want to avoid dumb people, you go on a server regularly that you can rely on, which sounds entirely reasonable to me. We used to have a TF2 server. Hell, I'm half tempted to create another one. Yeah, I think we might just do that. Get a Cynical Brit TF2 server up once again. We've had one on many occasions, and I can tell you for a fact that a well-admin server like that is extremely good, without question. So no, I am not under any sense of the word concerned, nor do I feel butthurt that people are now getting for free what I paid for at some point in the past. This is not the first time it's happened. It is extremely frequent, in fact, universally so, pretty much with gaming, that someone could buy it later on at a reduced price or indeed sometimes get it for free. I don't feel burnt about that. If I'm going to be an early adopter and play things on day one, then I accept that that is the cost of doing business. This one comes in from Steven that says, there's been a lot of gameplay decisions that are slowing down the pace of the shooter genre. such as weapons that need to be reloaded, an emphasis on encouraging the player to take cover, and giving AI the gift of self-preservation instinct, to name a few. While all of these have perfectly justifiable gameplay reasons for their inclusion, one of the recent trends that has baffled me has been the move to give enemies much more longevity. In shooters of old, the players were usually pitted against sizable hordes of disposable enemies that didn't outlast their welcome. Now it seems the trend is to have smaller groups of enemies, wherein even the weakest, scrawniest-looking members, the grunts from Halo as an example, could chew through whole magazines of hot lead before finally giving up the ghost. It seems that games that stick to the old ways are becoming an exception, and bullet sponginess is now the rule. Why is this? Why has there been a move towards giving the player less but tougher enemies to fight? I don't know if that's really the case, to be honest. I mean, even in games like, say, Modern Warfare, you got quite a lot of enemies thrown at you, and they died really, really fast. There are some games recently that, yes, enemies do take quite a lot of shots, but I think the emphasis really has been on headshots for a very, very long time. And I do mean a very long time. Pretty much as soon as they brought hitboxes into games and they realized the value of being able to shoot people in different parts of the body, it's all been about the headshot. There's plenty of examples, really, of these games that don't throw a lot of enemies at you, but also make them quite easy to kill. I don't think this bullet sponginess thing really is something that I would consider to be right. I mean, Halo, perhaps, but then again, you're talking about engaging enemies with shields in a futuristic environment. And yes, some of these enemies are bullet spongy and some are not, but it is more, these days, about an emphasis on headshots. More so than it used to be in the past. And as a result, mowing down hordes of enemies just doesn't work, because headshots require precision, especially bearing in mind that the gun handling mechanics now have advanced to such a point that you get recoil that is pseudo-realistic. For instance, as you can see in the background right here, I'm mowing down some dudes in the Fear 3 multiplayer practice thingy, and if I'm not shooting them in the head, they take a good 5 to 6 rounds to bring down usually, so that is quite a lot of effort. As regards to slowing the pace of the shooter genre down and things like that, I really do think it comes down to this whole pseudo-realism thing, and also, actually, this is something that you should consider to be very important, the scripted nature of things. Consider this. In the single player of Call of Duty Black Ops, there are areas where if you run ahead of a certain character, you will hit an invisible wall, preventing you from going there. Because the game is so spaced out and deliberately scripted in order to add to its length, that is why they've had to slow everything down. For instance, in Black Ops, you couldn't speed up the running speed in the gunplay way beyond what was in the single player because it just wouldn't feel the same and people would get freaked out by it. You can't have Quake Live style speed in the multiplayer of Black Ops because the single player was so slow to begin with, so they've had to make the multiplayer quite similar, otherwise it simply wouldn't gel. It's all of this scripting that's the problem. Developers don't want you speedrunning anymore because their games are high-fidelity, scripted rail shooters. It's true, they are. You look at the Black Ops single player, it's about 4 hours. You look at Modern Warfare 2, it's about 3.5 to 4 hours-ish. And if you could run at full speed through most of that, you could beat that game in under an hour. It would be horrible. Whereas you've got games like Duke Nukem 3D, for instance, whereby there is enough content there to keep you going for a long time. There are a lot of levels and they are well designed. It's not a straight path, it's not a shooting gallery. And they're okay with you figuring out the way to beat that level in 20 seconds, because they know you won't be able to pull it off the first time. I think that's what it really comes down to, a combination of the overly scripted nature of modern shooters, particularly, and lazy level design. So they slow everything down to elongate the experience. And that, of course, sucks. And I believe that's also why there are some FPS, not all, but some, that have bullet spongy enemies because they want you to stay in this area for longer. They don't want you blasting through this in a rate of knots. And of course, if you are looking for something that's the antithesis of that, I would recommend that you have a look at Serious Sam 3 BFE, which is coming out very soon indeed, and I'll bring you a WTFS video as soon as I get my grubby little mitts on it. This one comes in from Cody that says, you've talked about gaming publishers such as EA, nickel and diming the consumer by cutting out content made by the developer and selling it as DLC. Do you think that in the case of pre-order exclusives, that this is mostly the fault of retailers for making deals to buy more of the product in exchange for some type of exclusivity? I've noticed this in all types of media sales, such as CDs and movies. This isn't about having the choice of a deluxe version versus the regular. I buy CDs if the artist themselves is not selling an MP3 version of the album on their own to make sure they get more revenue. And I found that oftentimes there is always some type of exclusive content on the CD version. I'm not talking about something as simple as a lyric sheet, but more along the lines of songs on the album that are not available in any other way. And this, just like PC games, leads to piracy of those songs, or in some cases the entire album. Do you think this is the general trend of physical media sales? I think physical media is in a pretty tough spot right now because, honestly, we are getting to the stage where physical media will cease to exist at some point. I mean, right now, the only reason that physical media doesn't cease to exist, I think, is because a lot of countries and the major consumers of this media don't have fast enough internet to justify otherwise. I mean, for instance, downloading a film in 1080p with the proper uncompressed soundtrack and things like that, that would take a very, very long time in the UK or the US. And of course, those are two of the biggest consumers of physical media, whether or not it be games, CDs, or, of course, Blu-ray. So it comes down to that, really. And as a result, you've got retailers trying to hang on to this as much as possible, and I might add, the publishers and the distributors and the people that make this stuff to begin with. They don't want that model to die out overnight. They want to keep it going as long as possible. So they add these exclusives in to encourage you to buy these versions. I have to say that the addition of exclusive songs that are not available online is by far the dumbest thing in the world. People don't want albums anymore. For God's sake, hadn't we figured this out 5 years ago? This is why iTunes became so successful, and before that, it was the reason why Napster was so successful. Because people didn't want to buy albums anymore. We're not going to pay £15 for an album, for instance, that only has 3 songs on it we like. We're going to pick the ones that we like, and then we're going to disregard the rest of it. So, to me, it seems ridiculous that this is still happening. For God's sake, move away from it. It's not like you can't make a profit here. I mean, seriously, you can bypass a whole lot of nonsense by simply going purely digital on these kind of things. It's unfortunate, but it is the way that things are, and it's also the way that technology advances. And to be fair, digital media, when it comes to particularly movies, television shows, games, and music, is the way forward. It's a better deal for the consumer, and as a direct result of it, I guess that's why the retailers, the publishers, the distributors, and of course the developers are trying to hold that off as long as possible, because there are other and more old and tired ways of making money. Sad, but true. This one comes in from Shane that says, in the mailbox section of 060611, wow, you have a long memory, oh my god, you talked about the state of multiplayer parts and areas in single-player games. Now, I would like to build on that and ask your opinion on single-player that use a co-op feature. To clarify for those who do not know what this is, co-op is when the main campaign of the story of the game is made so you can play through and complete it while playing with another person. There are, however, also games like Portal 2 where the co-op feature is a completely separate story. I have always found these games to be incredibly fun if done right, since playing with another person adds a new depth to games. Since now there are not only NPCs in your story, but another player. So what's your opinion on developers that take their time to add co-op into games that could have been and are single-player games? Man, it was only a couple of years ago that we were all crying out for co-op. We really, really were. I'd like to give an example, actually, Sven co-op for the classic Half-Life 2. It was the next best thing to being able to play through the single player in a co-op mode, and it is only in the last few years that co-op has actually resurged, and it's good that it has. We were all crying out for the co-op experience, we really, really were. I think that adding co-op to pretty much any single player game is, for the most part, a good idea. I can think of maybe a couple of single-player games where co-op simply wouldn't suit it. I mean, for instance, Amnesia. You really want to put Amnesia in a co-op mode? Yeah, that would be terrible. I can't imagine that working at all. Maybe Duke Nukem as well, but why not, actually, when you think about it? Why not have a co-op going on right there? And hell, Serious Sam 3 BFE is going to allow, what, 16-player co-op? Yeah. So, to me, co-op seems like this kind of feature, which is, for the most part, extremely easy to implement, if the game wasn't horribly scripted. And I think maybe therein lies the problem. Because there are a lot of games that are so heavily scripted and on rails these days, they're simply not designed for a second player to be there, then you don't have co-op modes in that. But I really think that co-op should be very high up on the priority list of developers. It should be something that pretty much every developer is considering to put in their game one way or the other. I think it adds a additional layer of interactivity and, of course, social play. It's great in pretty much every respect. I can't think of a bad thing about co-op. I think the only problem is that when certain games pretty much force you to go co-op, unless they are very specifically designed that way. I mean, there's a game called Hunted the Demon's Forge, which is much better played co-op than single player. You can play it single player, but it's nowhere near as fun. I think as long as we don't have too many of those games, Army of Two being another example, by the way, then we're okay. I would like to see it be optional. I would not like to see it be the mainstay of a game, unless that game is very well designed to incorporate co-op, to the point where it simply would not work in single player at all, and the experience is highly enriched by it being designed for co-op from the ground up. So there you go. Co-op, yes, more co-op. As much co-op as we can possibly get in any genre that supports it, and maybe even a few genres that don't, because there is nothing wrong with having it there as an option. Go for it, definitely. Okay, folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Mailbox. That's also me done for the week. I shall be doing various things over the weekend. I'll try and get you some WTFS content. I'm just sort of trying to get back into the swing of things. It doesn't help that I have the Viking germs, so I am a little bit beaten up at the moment, but I'll be alright. And of course, I'll be looking to bring you WTFs of Fear 3, as well as perhaps Alice Madness Returns, and a few indie games as well, coming over the next few days. My name has been Totalbiscuit, and I will see you next time.
All this blood, so little time.